This presentation is brought to you by Arizona State University's Julianne Wrigley Global Institute of Sustainability and a generous investment by Julianne Wrigley.
I want to ask one question for both of them, and then I'll open it up. You actually touched on this, Andy, a moment ago, and that is, we think a lot here about how you get the information, knowledge, scholarship exported from the university. How do you get it applied? Many of the people in this room, faculty, students alike, and many of our colleagues across campus deal with aspects of sustainability on a daily basis in teaching, research, and things like that. But with the possible exception of the formal technology transfer system that universities have, universities are not particularly good at presenting their knowledge, presenting their information, communicating, as you were talking about last night, Andy, to the decision makers. So how do you export this rich understanding and knowledge and discovery of technologies, but not just technologies, but the social dynamics and things like that that are not widgets and cars or computers, to the decision makers who actually have to apply these things to solve the problem of sustainability? How do we get over that bridge? How do we get from here to there? Because my experience, at least, is that decision makers, whether they're city or state or they're private or public, look to universities for these solutions, but often we're not forthcoming with them in a way that they can understand or use them. So in your opinion, what are some good ways perhaps that we as university, members of university and a knowledge community, can we export some of this knowledge so that it gets applied to problem solving?
It's a wonderful question. It presumes that decision makers matter. And I do think they matter in some ways because they apportion resources. The federal research and the federal R&D budget. Actually, can I quickly show a slide that's relevant? While I'm pulling up the slide, I'll say that there's evidence. I think the thing that the academy can do best is to make the case that information and that science particularly and that inquiry matter. And that part of what has to be conveyed is that failure matters, because we've kind of if you leave it up to the conventional politics to determine how to apportion a finite R&D budget, for example, you'll always do it based on things other than that reality, that if you really want to advance society, you have to let a lot of things bloom and fail to have some not fail. Just to give you a rough sense of where we're at with energy inquiry in this country, and this chart, you don't need to see the details. Basically, Sputnik is at the left, and the end of the stimulus package is at the right. This is a graph of 50 years of scientific inquiry as funded basic R&D money from the federal government. And the private sector money is different. It's had a downward trend overall. What you see in yellow is the space race. So back in the, Sputnik went beep, 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 and we really had a moment, as we were saying this morning, because it was truly an existential kind of moment. So we cared a lot, and we had several tens of billions of dollars a year of expenditure on R&D related to space. That all kind of faded away. The upper band, the dark purple, is health, medical research, not building hospitals, but studying cancer. And there's a lot of questions about whether that was effective. A lot of it failed. And maybe that was all misappropriated, but it was misappropriated because it shows we care about health, so we spend a lot of our R&D money on health. Energy is the green band in the middle that you can sort of see, and it looks like a python that swallowed a tennis ball sometime in the 1970s. And the tennis ball, of course, was the energy crisis. So we went from it being a tiny portion of our R&D budget to it being a slightly less tiny portion. And then it fades away, and it's a bipartisan slumber party, as I described it on the blog, on energy ever since. So I think the scientific and academic community focused on these issues can make a pretty compelling case that, hey, society, if you care about energy, setting aside the climate question, that's how much we're interested in energy right now. It's not a hard point, not a hard thing to make. And now one last related image is, this is the entire R&D budget of the country. All of that stuff fits in the red at the top there. The rest is military R&D. We spend about $80 billion a year on military research and development now. And I don't think this means we need to rob the Pentagon of some of that. I think the Pentagon already is shifting toward understanding that its R&D should be focused on some of the same issues that we're talking about here. So I think shifting priorities is important, not necessarily taking things away entirely. But that graph is like, for me, it's kind of like in Close Encounters of the Third Kind, the movie where everyone's kind of keeps building the same shape. I keep showing this over and over and over again.
Well, Brad, while you formulate your answer, I wanted to publicly thank Andy for not saying that, it's over there in your chair and back. Oh, yeah. For not saying I asked a dumb, irrelevant, and unviable question, as someone else did. But you go right ahead, Brad.
So I think Andy's first statement is important. Do decision makers matter? More subtly, how do they matter? How many degrees of freedom do they really have to make decisions that impact the way these systems flow? And I don't know the answer to that question, but I think it's a lot less than we usually think it is. On the role of academia, I think that the usual position that most academics take in a discussion like this is that if only the public and decision makers were smart enough to listen to us, we would provide that utopia for which they yearn. In fact, I think that, and I should point out that this is my opinion only and not that of Arizona State University, I think that academia is badly broken. I think that we have too many people that are living too far in the past, teaching too much information that's already migrated to the net and is commonly available. I think that the challenge that academia faces is trying to learn how to teach wisdom in a world that's gone from information scarcity to information overload, as I think Andy has shown very well. And I think, frankly, we do a pretty bad job of it. And part of the reason we do a bad job of it is that there are very few people in academia that are willing to admit how badly we're performing right now.
This presentation is brought to you by Arizona State University's Julianne Wrigley Global Institute of Sustainability for educational and non-commercial use only.